We are looking at the daily events leading up to the crucifixion of Christ. We have already looked at Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. Today our study is on what took place on Thursday. It seems like Passover marked the beginning of the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. Passover traditionally had to take place within the city walls, and people will buy a lamb if they didn't have one already. They'll take it to the temple. The priest would sacrifice it. Then portion of that meat will be brought home. They will prepare it with fresh herbs and spices. And by the evening or very close to the sunset, the entire family will gather together. Most probably, if it's a extended family, the head of the household, maybe the grandfather or the great-grandfather or father, would offer a prayer of thanksgiving. Then they will take part in the Passover meal itself. So on this Thursday, the disciples came to Jesus and they asked him, "Master, where do you want us to prepare the Passover meal?" It seems like this must have taken place somewhere in the morning, because remember, they had to find a place, they had to get a lamb, which would not be so hard, but they still had to get it. They had to go into town, they had to go into the temple, they had to sacrifice and bring it back and prepare the meal and so on and so forth. So asking for a specific location. And Jesus' response was so interesting. His response resembled the time on Sunday when he asked them to go to the nearby village to find a donkey so he can ride that into the city. So he said, go there, and you will find a certain man and he will lead you to the room, so on and so forth. And they did that, they prepared the meal, and everything was ready, and by the evening the meal was ready. Jesus, along with all of his disciples, gathered together in that room. Now, this room must have been a big room, enough space there for all 12 of them plus Jesus to sit. So they are together to take part in this meal. I'm sure it's a time of celebration, but we know that a lot of things are going through the mind of Christ. So once they are there, we see Christ going into lengthy instructions. He is talking. This is going to be a special time. This is going to be the last time. They are going to take part in what we call the Last Supper. And for Jesus and this band of evangelists, this was the last of so many things. Obviously, it was going to be the last time that they would eat together. This will be the very last time all 12 plus Jesus will be together very soon. Just perhaps in a few minutes or hours, Judas is going to depart from them forever. And this was perhaps the last time they had worship together, because after this time we do read that they had a time of worship. So they came together, they sat together. Then we see Jesus instructing and praying for his brothers. Long instruction. He's going into very detailed, giving them some last minute instructions, and then he prayed for them. And this is a very personal and intimate prayer. And it's a lengthy prayer, but there's one sentence within that prayer always stuck with me. And this is the sentence. Jesus prayed, I do not pray that you should take them out of this world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. What a prayer. See, this tells me that the disciples were supposed to be there. Or shall I say, we are supposed to be here. We are supposed to be here wrestling with sin, wrestling with temptation, wrestling with sickness and failures and viruses and so on and so forth. And the difference is this: since we are not of this world, we are not supposed to become worldly. So instead of becoming worldly, we are supposed to be godly. Instead of becoming people of the world or following what the world is requiring, we are supposed to be here, but our allegiance must be towards God and Christ. God requires not worldliness, but godliness. That is the summary of Christ's prayer for his disciples. I do not pray that you should take them out of this world, but you should keep them away from the evil one. Jesus prayed for his brothers. Then, interestingly, we read that day he prayed for himself. He prayed for himself. Here is the Son of God talking to the Father. The Son telling the Father, Father, the time has come. I have fulfilled everything word for word up to this point, and I'm going to take the last steps. And he is asking the Father to glorify. Then we read that they sung hymn together and they left together for the Mount of Olives. John tells us that it was Brook Kidron and Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus prayed with his disciples. It was on the side of the Mount of Olives. Anyway, they went there. Obviously, Judas did not accompany them there. Here Jesus asked the disciples to sit there. He asked them to pray. He said, watch and pray. Then we read that he took Peter, James and John. We read about this in Mark chapter 14. Then he asked them to come along with him. He sat them down and you sit here and pray. Just a few feet away from them, and he started praying. And when we read this prayer, this is probably the most intense prayer that is recorded in the Bible. I mean, we have some amazing prayers. The many prayers of Moses on behalf of the people of Israel come to mind. Hannah's prayer, definitely. Jabez's prayer, and the prayer that Elijah offered on the Mount of Carmel. I mean, so many prayers like that would come to mind, but this was intense. Mark told us that he fell face down or fell on the ground. So his posture is different. And look at the circumstance. This was the prayer of a dying man, or a man who is going to die just in a few hours. Now this is a catch. Not for anything that he has done, not for his sins, but for the sins of the entire world. So his posture is different. The circumstances are very unique. Emotions, I mean, he is really feeling the grief and the brokenness inside, because listen to his words. He said, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. He was feeling this weight inside. And many of the evangelists, they describe for us the condition. In one occasion, we read that he was sweating profusely. Luke told us that his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. I don't know about you. You know, I have had many times of prayer where I was broken, emotional, I was in need, crying out to God, but nothing that matched prayer like this. He prayed. Momentarily, we read that Judas came. Interestingly, it says that he came with the multitudes. The chief priests, elders, soldiers, they were all there. Jesus came forward and betrayed Christ with a kiss. He was arrested. Sadly, we read in Matthew, his disciples fled. They ran away. And immediately, the multitude, they took Jesus to Annas. Now Annas, he was not the high priest at that time. He was high priest many years ago. He was high priest for close to 15 years or so. Then he was sort of dethroned by the government. But now, even though he was not the high priest, he was very well respected by the people. All his sons became high priest in a later time. Now Caiaphas was the high priest at that time, and Caiaphas was Annas's son-in-law. So they first brought Christ to Annas, and we see Annas questioning him, but it seems like they didn't spend a lot of time there. Immediately, Jesus was sent to Caiaphas by Annas for further judgment. It is very possible, we don't need to think that these homes were so far apart. It's very possible that they may have shared one courtyard, so it may have been just like walking from this side to over to that side. In any case, first they brought him to Annas, then he was sent to Caiaphas. By this time, it was very late, perhaps very close to midnight on Thursday. Let's review the main events of this day. Jesus instructed his disciples to find a place and prepare the Passover meal. Jesus and the disciples came together. They ate together the Passover meal in the upper room. This is where we see Christ instituting what we call the Lord's Supper. Then Christ instructed and prayed for his disciples. Then Christ prayed for himself. Then in the Garden of Gethsemane, we see Christ praying again in great pain and agony. Very shortly after that, Jesus was betrayed by one of his own disciples, Judas. He was arrested. He was immediately taken to Annas. Then from there, he was sent to Caiaphas. This is what took place on Thursday before the crucifixion.